Mr. Teochew.
Mr. Speaker, my response will address questions 3 to 5 by Mr. Teochew and Ms. Eileen Chong, Pei Shan on the Speak Mandarin campaign in today's order paper. Well, sir, questions 6 to 12 on today's order paper addresses the use of dialect in films. The two sets of questions, while distinct, are related. So may I speak your permission to allow MDDI to provide the answers to questions 6 to 12 before MCCY and MDDI address any supplementary questions that the members may have. Members may be better informed after hearing both sets of responses, and that might give better clarity to our discussions.
Yes, you may. Please proceed.
So the Speak Mandarin campaign was launched in 1979 by promoting a common language across the Chinese community. It helps Chinese Singaporeans from different dialect backgrounds to communicate with one another, and it preserves access to the Chinese culture through Mandarin rather than through separate dialects. By simplifying the linguistic environment, it also gives our bilingual policy the best chance to succeed, and these objectives remain valid today. The Promote Mandarin Council, which comprises distinguished private and public individuals across all different sectors who are volunteers, regularly reviews the campaign to keep its framing, approach, and objectives relevant and meaningful in Singapore's multicultural context. Well, it's important to do so as the language environment continues to evolve. Singapore families are using English more at home, and much as our young want to be better at Mandarin, the opportunities to do so may be insufficient. So hence, the campaign has evolved from promoting Mandarin as a common language to strengthening the appreciation for our Singapore Chinese cultural identity and making the learning of Mandarin fun and enjoyable. Its current tagline, 讲华语我也可以, or Speak Mandarin, yes I can, encourages everyone to learn Mandarin even as English becomes more dominant in daily life. In education, MSF and MOE are setting aside more curriculum time to expose young Chinese students to Mandarin. For older students, we provide opportunities to those with the aptitude and interest to develop into bicultural talents. It's a challenging task, and our Chinese teachers are working very hard, and we'll continue to do our best to continue to uphold the bilingual policy. As the use of English continues to displace mother tongues, the use of dialects in Singapore has continued to decline. And we increasingly see dialect artistic materials not as competing against the use of Mandarin, but as part of our heritage and cultural practices that deepens Singaporeans' appreciation of our cultural heritage. Hence, the National Arts Council supports art groups that practices traditional forms of dialect cultures, such as the Siong Ling Musical Association, which preserves Nanyin, and Nam Hua Opera, the Teochew opera group. The National Heritage Board recognizes and supports practitioners and groups that transmit Chinese dialect culture. Clan associations such as the Singapore Hokkien Hui Guan or the Teochew Poyip Hui Guan and Hainan Hui Guan also conduct regular dialect classes for interested Singaporeans. Our linguistic diversity and heritage are distinctive parts of Singapore Chinese culture. The government welcomes ideas to preserve dialect cultures while upholding the importance of Mandarin. We will continue to take in feedback and will work with the community to consider carefully what further steps are appropriate to support and to promote our distinctive Singapore Chinese culture within our multicultural society.
SMS Tan, you will be taking questions 6 to 12, right? Please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, my response will cover the questions raised by Mr. Teochew, Mr. Gerard Giam, Mr. Kenneth Tiong, Mr. Saktiandi Supat, Mr. Dennis Tan, Ms. Valerie Lee, Mr. Liang Eng Wah, and Dr. Neo Kok Peng in today's order paper, as well as related questions by Mr. Darrell David and Ms. Mariam Jaffa for subsequent sittings. If members are satisfied with the response, they may wish to withdraw their questions after this session. Guidelines on language use in media are implemented by the Infocomm Media Development Authority, or IMDA. They support the government's long-standing policy to promote Mandarin as one of 4 official languages and have generally served us well. However, as noted in MCCY's earlier reply today, Singapore's language environment has evolved. Recognizing this, in implementing the guidelines, IMDA has exercised greater flexibility to allow more dialect content in films. Each year, around 30 to 40 dialect films are screened at film festivals. At the same time, IMDA has allowed unrestricted screenings of films with substantial use of dialect, such as 881 or Papayao, Long Long Time Ago, and Wonderland. For the film Dear You, IMDA has approved a total of 272 screenings of the Teochew version and is prepared to approve additional screenings should the film distributor request them in response to audience demand. Beyond these implementation changes, several members have called for the guidelines themselves to be reviewed. We recognize that the circumstances have changed since the guidelines were first introduced. There is therefore scope to consider how we can expand the space for dialects while continuing to uphold the importance of Mandarin. In doing so, we should also take into account the different media platforms. For example, there are no dialogue restrictions for art performances or content available on the internet and online streaming services. On free-to-air television and radio, we believe that Mandarin should continue to be the mainstay. For cinemas, we are prepared to allow more screenings of dialect language films so as to provide audiences with greater access to such content. We appreciate the feedback from members and will carefully consider what further steps are appropriate.
Mr. Tsai Ing-cho.
Thank you. Thank you, Speaker. I'd like to declare my interest as advisor to Chinatown Heritage Centre, an attraction referencing 1950s Singapore, with our exhibits featuring dialect content. Parasite sparked conversations on inequality, how to make billions before grandma dies, spurred end-of-life conversations. Dear You has renewed interest in the sacrifices of our forefathers and personal heritage. Locally, Parasite screened close to 12,000 sessions, How to Make Millions Before Grandma Dies around 5,000, Dear You in Mandarin 2,570, while its Teochew version, the original, a mere 126 screenings, public screenings as of early July. My first question to MDDI is, today, cinema is the only mainstream medium in Singapore where Chinese dialect content is restricted. OTT streamings on social media platforms and YouTube all already carry dialect content without equivalent restrictions. Should cinema remain subject to the campaign's dialect restriction rationale? There is also a commercial case. Our cinema operators have been under real pressure. Dear You shows that original dialect programming can be an asset, not a niche indulgence. Dear You has drew families off their sofas and back into theatres together across generations, including older Singaporeans who otherwise might not step into a cinema at all. Will the ministry go further in the review to consider removing this default restriction? In Mandarin, please. 师父领进门，修行看个人。可是方言艺术正面临一个更基础的问题：师父老了，却没有年轻人进门。方言艺术家逐渐凋零，后续无人，薪火难以传承。请问文化、社区及青年部有什么具体方案？ 支持方言艺术的传承，让他们在新加坡持续发展。华语是我们在社会里沟通的桥梁，方言让我们在家中与阿公阿嬷心连心。谢谢。
SMS Tan.
So I thank the member for his clarifications on the review of the use of dialect in cinemas and films. As I've explained earlier in my reply, we are hearing feedback from different parties, industry stakeholders, community, and we appreciate and welcome the conversations that has arose from the DLU screening. Actually, just yesterday, I had a screening in my constituency for my residents, one theatre in Teochew, one theatre in Mandarin. I went by, speak to my residents before my MPS sessions. It's very interesting. For the Teochew hall, almost all seniors, maybe some of the middle-aged people like me were there. Some were there because they wanted to hear the original Teochew dialect movie. Some watched the Mandarin one and wanted to hear the Teochew one. But when I went to the Mandarin hall, it was very interesting. Some will actually watch the Teochew one and wanted to watch the Mandarin one because they really couldn't quite understand the Teochew dialect, especially for non-Teochew speaking or native Teochew speaking individuals. But in addition to seniors, I was very pleasantly surprised to see many young people, children, secondary school, even primary school. They were there accompanying their grandparents, their parents, and it was very good to see a family affair. And the young people, when I spoke to them, wanted to understand more about the environment in which your great-grandparents or grandparents had lived through in the early days of independence. So, although the member talked about Teochew screening of the original Teochew dialect of the firm being popular, and we have already said that we will provide flexibility, and we are continuing to provide flexibility. In fact, the number that the member cited has been updated in my reply. I said 272, if the member listened correctly just now, carefully just now. And the firm distributor knows that we continue to provide flexibility. So in practice, if the firm distributor feels that audience demand is there for the Teochew original firm, we will provide flexibility. But more importantly, having a Mandarin version creates a bigger access to many more audiences in Singapore, not just those who are speaking the dialect, especially our young people. So there is value in having a Mandarin version of the firm, in addition to being aligned with our broader language policy. The member mentioned a little bit about OTT, over-the-top platforms, internet streaming, for example. Different platforms have historically been regulated differently based on different reach of audiences. Cinemas, being a publicly regulated exhibition space in Singapore, ought to be seen closer to mainstream media. Having said that, as I explained in my reply, we appreciate that the language environment has changed and are prepared to see how we can expand access to dialect movies as we take our review. So I'll just add on finally to say that over the years, it's not as if our guidelines have been static. We have been updating it, refining it, adapting them, for example, providing more flexibility of dialect use in firms, and even some of the mainstream radio stations and TV channels. So our policy was remaining true to the policy intent of the larger language policy in Singapore. The implementation of it has evolved, have been flexible, have been pragmatic, taking into consideration the environment, the language environment. And I mentioned earlier in my reply, some of the local movies like Papayao, Wanderlust, substantive dialect content in the film. But look at the historical context, look at heritage value, and reflects Singapore stories. And IMDA has taken a flexible, pragmatic approach, and will continue to do so.
Ms. Eileen Chong. Oh, sorry, Minister David Teo.
Mr. Speaker, to answer the Chinese portion of the member's question. And in the spirit of the Speak Mandarin campaign, if you allow me to take this one SQ in Mandarin. 方言艺术是我们传统艺术很重要的一部分。那国家艺术理事会呢，多年来也非常积极的支持与栽培我们华族艺术方言，尤其是方言艺术。那为相关团体也提供资助，也帮他们吸引新观众。那受惠团体就包括了鼓励年轻一代使用多种方言来传唱戏曲的新加坡传统艺术中心。那艺理会也通过奖学金来栽培我们的新一代的艺术从业者。那青年戏曲艺术家陈伟田 就从小就跟随南华潮剧社来登台演出。那前年艺理会也资助他到上海戏剧院来深造。那去年艺理会和新加坡华族文化中心也携手创办首次的传统戏曲节，那由5支本地剧团同台献艺，呈现多元戏曲的风格。那但是去年我们的艺理会就已经资助了10部作品，那也包括了闽剧、潮剧、粤剧和京剧。那许多华族方言艺术作品也纳入新加坡文化通行证，让我们的年轻一代更有一个机会来体会我们的非常独特的那个方言文化。我们会继续为华族方言艺术开阔更大的空间，而且来培养下一代的传承者。谢谢。
I see quite a few hands, and we do have 130 PQs. I'd like to get as many questions to be answered as soon as many as possible. Just now, Mr. Chai, I must say that your asking of your SQ was a bit too long. You went a little bit into the mini speech. I almost stopped you, but it's a good negative example of what I hope to see going forward. Ms. Eileen Chong.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very heartened to hear SMS Tan confirm that IMDA is indeed looking to expand space for dialects while upholding Mandarin. I'm also very heartened to hear Minister Neo actually then respond to this by saying that actually dialects are no longer seen in competition with Mandarin, right? In fact, they play a role in deepening cultural appreciation of our Chinese heritage. So I would like to actually echo the Promote Mandarin Council's position that we actually do not need to pick sides between Mandarin and dialects. So I would like to ask whether MCCY will be working with IMDA to review the relevance of the policy which still requires permission for us to screen dialect films. Instead of trying to see where we can exercise more flexibility, why not consider offering, the freedom of simply just screening these dialect films? Because if dialect is always the one that requires permission, then have we not already chosen a side? Thank you.
Minister David Neo.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member for her support. As I explained earlier, MCCY and MDDI are open to ideas about how can we preserve dialect cultures while upholding the importance of Mandarin, and we'll continue to take in all the feedback and consider carefully the appropriate next steps on how to do this well better. Thank you.
Mr. Dennis Tan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have raised issues relating to the preservation and use of dialects in this House several times in the past, including requests to lift the broadcast film ban, the broadcast ban. And indeed, I'm heartened to hear the ministers have spoken on this. And indeed, in my view, the main competitor to Mandarin today is not dialects, but English. I would like to ask the government, given that the media is the primary vehicle for youth culture engagement, whether the either ministry agree that to review the lifting of the 1981 dialect broadcast restrictions to allow meaningful dialect-rich content that connects young Singaporeans to their grandparents, to their family, and importantly, to their cultural heritage. And I say this, as I said before, we are reaching a tipping point with an aging population, younger generation with limited exposure to dialects. And once this culture and heritage dies off, there's no way of rebuilding. And I would therefore like to ask the government to really consider putting more effort to work with the clans and other civic groups to promote our dialect heritage. And a question for SMS Tan. I don't think you have addressed my PQ directly. And I would like to ask relating to my PQ, ASQ first. And will the ministry consider establishing a standing institutional arrangement between IMD and NHB with regards to a consultation on the heritage aspects for dialect films? Thank you.
SMS Tan.
So I can take the member's question first about the institution arrangement. Well, IMDA works very closely with different government agencies, including the National Heritage Boards. In fact, we work very closely in terms of looking at firms, the classification of firms. So there's no need for explicit institutions that are already doing so. But more importantly, I think his earlier point was really whether we consider heritage, artistic merit, and the context in which the dialects is used in the film. And I'd like to reply in the affirmative, as I explained earlier in my reply, and I gave some examples of some of the locally made films like Papayao, long time ago, and many others. We do consider the context in which the dialect is used in the film, whether it's appropriate, reflects the cultural context of the milieu of that time. For example, Papaya was telling about a story about the Ge-Tai culture, and some of it, the nuances of it, the texture of it requires the dialect to be used. So we do consider. So just want to assure the member that we do so.
Ms. Valerie Lee.
Thank you, Speaker. I have two SQs, one for MCCY. So with fewer Singaporeans speaking dialects reach heritage tied to these dialects risk being lost, what steps are MCCY taking to ensure that Chinese dialect cultures are being systematically documented, preserved, and transmitted, particularly to younger Singaporeans? The second SQ is for MDDI. Will the Ministry publish clearer guidelines incorporating the said flexibility for dialect general screenings and share them in advance so that film distributors will know what criteria will apply to these films? Thank you.
Minister David Neo.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member for a question, but Chinese dialect cultures are an integral part of our distinctive Singapore Chinese culture. When it comes to documentation, the NHB works very closely with heritage practitioners, clan associations, and all who are keen to, and they fund them as well, to research and to document our dialects and cultural heritage. So one example is in Singapore Amoy Association recently published an article or book on the essays on Hokkien culture in Singapore. While another example is Singapore Chinese Cultural Centre's Culturepedia. Well, that's a repository on Singapore Chinese culture, and it has documented specific aspects of the Chinese dialect cultures with articles ranging from languages all the way to music. When it comes to transmission and education, we also safeguard and we expand the space for our dialect cultures through initiatives such as the Stewards for the Intangible Culture Heritage Award. So I think the member was also with me last year at this award, but these awards are to recognize individuals and organizations who take on a strong role in promoting dialects within our context. So I'm also very glad to note that one of the winners of the Youth Award is Mr. Adrian Ong, who practices and promotes Hokkien string and glove puppetry. So we'll continue to work with all our clan associations, heritage practitioners, and all who are keen to document and to expand the space for our Singapore Chinese dialect cultures.
Mr. Gerald Giam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My focus of my SQ would be on the film classification guidelines, which currently state that, quote, Chinese films meant for theatrical release should generally be in Mandarin, in line with the Speak Mandarin campaign. Films with dialect content are allowed on a case-by-case basis, unquote. For the past 40 years or so, hasn't the Speak Mandarin campaign been geared more towards encouraging English-speaking Chinese Singaporeans to speak Mandarin instead of changing the language-speaking habits of dialect-speaking Singaporeans? If so, why do the film classification guidelines still hold on to the past focus of this campaign by restricting the screenings of dialect films in Singapore? And be that as it may, can case-by-case basis in the guidelines be interpreted as allowing certain dialect films a general commercial release without restrictions on the number of screenings?
SMS Tan.
Sir, let me take a step back and answer Mr. Giam's question. As earlier articulated by Minister for MCCY or the broader language policy, Mandarin is one of the 4 official languages in Singapore and is a mainstay. And the historic context of Speak Mandarin campaign is about promoting the use of Mandarin. At that point in time, the language environment was different. And because it succeeded, that's why the language environment here today is different. Our young people are proficient, competent with English and many with Mandarin as well. So it's a success. The policy objectives still remain because it's important, as articulated by MCCY earlier. But our implementation of the guidelines, of the regulations, have evolved with a changing language environment. And I gave many examples earlier. And today's conversation or debate here in the Parliament around DLU is a step in that direction. And I said earlier, we welcome views from stakeholders, industry members, community partners, people who are enthusiastic about dialect culture, enthusiastic about trying to understand their roots, identity, including younger ones, and welcome it as part of a conversation. And as part of this conversation, we are reviewing our current film classification framework with respect to use of dialect in films. And we will take some time to do so because it's an evolution, it's a thoughtful approach, speaking to people, making adjustments, not abrupt changes, like all good policies are. So I want to assure Mr. Giam that for DLU, we have given flexibility. The film distributor knows we're giving him flexibility. And I earlier mentioned we approved another 100 screenings today. That's why bringing up the screenings to 272. And if there's more demand, we'll discuss with the film distributor and see how we can provide additional flexibility. But we'll take a review as it comes along, and certainly something that we'll speak to all members, industry partners, community partners, and take their views on board.
Mr. Saktiandi Supat.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have 2 SQs. My PQs that Ms. SMS answered earlier, I thank him for answering that because those are questions that my dialect-speaking seniors in Toa Payoh East and their families have actually raised to me. My first SQ is, as Singapore population ages, does the government regard original language Chinese dialect films as supporting active aging, social inclusion, and in particular intergenerational bonding? If so, how is this reflected in IMDA's policy? Second SQ is, has IMDA assessed audience demand for original language Chinese dialect films, particularly among seniors and younger Singaporeans? And if not, will such an assessment inform any future policy review? Thank you.
SMS Tan.
So I thank the members for his 2 supplementary questions. Well, firstly, I must say I empathize with his Toa Payoh East residents. Like Bedok, we have one of the more older estates and many seniors. And of course, they hold dialect and engagement with dialect as a very core part of their identity, their experiences. And I must add that beyond just films and cinema, actually there are many other venues for which seniors and those even not so old, younger ones, to engage with dialect culture. Clan associations, programs, different streaming applications, or even activities in the community. So it's not just isolated or confined to films. Ironically, as I mentioned earlier in my reply, when I visited the Mandarin theatre, theatre that screened the Mandarin version of the DLU show, there were actually more young people, more intergenerational engagements, because the grandchildren, the children came together with their parents and grandparents. And because it was in Mandarin, it was more accessible to younger people. And when you talk about intergenerational cohesion, engagement, it really goes beyond just language. It's about creating the shared experiences and a space from which these conversations and dialogue happen. So we will certainly consider the different inputs as part of the review, but rest assured to the member that there are many other options and venues for seniors or younger ones to get engaged with dialect culture.
Mr. Kenneth Tiong.
谢谢议长先生。上个月我和选区的潮州居民谈话，他们问我，做你比赛对有朝戏，意思是我们为什么不可以看潮州戏？议长先生，我有3个问题。第一，一个简单的问题，部长们自己看的是哪一个版本？是不是潮州版还是华语版？第二，我想请部长把这项指导原则背后的目标说清楚。政府的目标是推广华语还是限制方言？如果是推广华语，这和限制方言是2件事。那政府会不会检讨所有纯粹为了限制方言而存在的措施，包括电影和广播，把没有必要的限制去除掉？第3个问题，对 MCCY 部长，方言会馆举办的方言课程目前仅限本方言群体成员参加，政府会不会扩大招生范围？谢谢。
Who wants to go first? Minister David Neo.
首先，部长没有时间看电影。But to the members, the question about the dialect Hokkien classes, I think we work with the client associations all the time, and they are very interested in promoting the dialects as well as our respective cultures, because, like I said, they contribute very distinctively towards our Singapore Chinese culture. And if there's a demand, I think they will be more than happy to kind of extend the classes to more people.
SMS Tan.
So I thank the member for his excuse in Mandarin. Please allow me to reply in Mandarin as well. 议长先生，我在英语演讲谈到了我国针对方言电影的措施，我用华语总结一下。这部电影感动人心，在本地反应热烈，片中人物讲的潮州话也让许多人，尤其是我们的阿公阿嬷倍感亲切。很多国人也因此讨论起方言电影的放映限制。我们听到了各方的看法，也感谢大家提出的意见。事实上，随着我国语言环境的改变，政府时不时关注方言电影，配合需求，适当的让电影呈现更多方言内容。我们会继续认真聆听大家的意见，仔细探讨是否进一步放宽限制，增加方言电影的放映场次，让本地观众有更多机会接触和欣赏方言电影。
Last SQ, Mr. Liang Engwa.
Thank you, sir. In Mandarin, please. 首先，我要感谢资讯通信媒体发展局处理这个给阿嬷的情书的潮语版，展现的整个安排展现了灵活性，并批准加印回应公众对这部电影的需求。然后这部电影的反响，也反映了不少国人都希望通过方言电影接触和传承自己的文化记忆。所以刚才听到部长说，会检讨这个方言电影的政策，我感到非常欣慰。所以在这里想追问部长一下，在这个方言政策的检讨的期间呢，对于接下来类似的这个方言电影，资媒局是否会以一个更开放、更清晰、更透明度的方式来处理方言电影的要求？谢谢。
SMS Tan.
Sir, allow me to also reply in Mandarin.
继续吧。
感谢议长先生。刚才所说的，我们这个政策的目标，讲华语政策目标，这几年来的目标不忘初心，一直是为这个目标上下一心，齐同协力。可是，在措施方面，怎么有灵活性的去 针对电影放言电影的措施，我们一直都有抱着一个非常务实、非常有灵活性的态度。比如说刚才我在回应其他的国会议员所说的提出的疑问的时候，我们新加坡有本地很多制作，比如说881啊，是很多不同的制作，虽然电影的内容方言比较多，可是我们也是有灵活性的去看法去针对，而且比较通融的去让它去播放。所以这次给阿嬷的情书也得到很多国人的热烈响应。我们会继续以灵活性的态度去看这部电影。如果真的有需求还可以去批出更多的潮州语版本的电影。所以给一个Mr. 梁先生一个安心，我们会有灵活性去有个态度去务实的和灵活性的态度去看这些电影。可是最重要的还是要以抱着不忘初心的态度，以我们讲华语的目标前进。谢谢。
Okay, one last SQ, Dr. Neo.
谢谢议长先生。今天我们很多人都谈电影，我想谈电台 （radio station）。当我们步入这个比较老年化的那个社会的时候呢，我们的这些年长的居民是需要一些，他们听很多歌，不同的歌。不过我们现在有限制的是没有办法听方言的歌，所以我想我能不能够在我们现有的6个中文平台电台的广播上，有一个特别的一个广播电台是针对比较老旧的歌，那种黄金年华的歌，跟可能50%是中文的，另外50%是方言的，可以照顾这些我们年老的长辈，让他们有可以在闲余的时间呢，能够享受多一点他们喜欢的歌，可能我现在不听了，谢谢。
SMS Tan, the old days of redifusion.
Sir, in respect to the Mandarin supplementary question, let me also try to address it in Mandarin. Mr. Neo 刚才说到的是不只是电影，而是电台还有电视。其实这方面，我们首先认为，华语应该是主流，华语应该是主流。我们讲华语的一个行动，最重要还是讲华语为主。其实我们看这几十年来，我们的语言的环境都非常的不一样了。我记得小时候学华文的时候非常辛苦，因为其实不同方言这跟华语的腔调有点一样。其实我读中学的时候，在华侨中学，我很多从马来西亚来的中学的朋友们同学们，他们以前是在马来西亚读小学，后来在我们的华侨中学读中学。他们虽然写的都 OK， 可是讲的时候可能有点不标准，因为他成长一个广东一个环境里面，语言的环境里面，所以我们觉得电台、电视最重要还是不忘初心，讲华语还是华语为主流。可是在这方面，我们有灵活性和务实性的去有点变通。比如说我们8频道Channel 8。他们有一个时间段是拜五早上时间段，也是放方言，尤其是新闻内容。我们的958频道也是在不同的时间，比如说早上10点半、11点半和12点半，用不同的方言，广东啊、福建啊不同的方言有新闻的报道。所以这方面我们也了解到，我们年长者也需要有点空间了解他们新闻还有不同的报道。所以我们这方面已经有了灵活性的变通。最重要，主流还是很多都是谈到我们电影给阿嬷情书所带来的热烈反应，我们会这方面去探讨了。谢谢。